An early World War II mystery. A diving and salvage team in Estonia says it's found well-preserved parts of debris from a junker's.
For 72 years, the USS Indianapolis sat somewhere at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. 879 men dead, hundreds eaten by sharks over 4 nightmarish days, and families left with nothing but silence and unanswered questions. Then, in 2017, a research team finally found it, 18,000 feet underwater, after 7 decades of searching. That's just one of 20 World War II mysteries that stayed buried for decades, and now they've finally been solved. But here's the thing. Some of these answers don't bring comfort. They bring questions we almost wish we'd never asked. Like who really betrayed Anne Frank after 2 years of hiding in that Amsterdam attic? What happened to the hero who saved 100,000 lives and then vanished without a trace? And the truth about Hitler's death? It's stranger than any conspiracy theory ever imagined. Some of these revelations bring long-awaited closure. Others are genuinely disturbing. Let's get into it. 20. The disappearance of Flight 19. On December 5, 1945, 5 American Navy bombers took off from Florida on what should have been a simple training mission. The weather was clear, the pilots were experienced, and then they vanished. The flight leader radioed that his compasses had stopped working. He believed they were flying over the Florida Keys. In reality, they were above the Bahamas, heading deeper into the Atlantic with every passing minute. His men questioned the direction, but military discipline kept them flying in formation. As the weather worsened and night fell, fuel ran out. One by one, the planes went silent. Later, investigations pieced together what happened. Compass failure combined with a critical misjudgment sent all 5 planes far off course. To make things worse, a rescue plane sent to find them also disappeared that night. The mystery fed the legend of the Bermuda Triangle for decades, but the truth was simpler and more tragic. Human error, broken instruments, and terrible weather sealed their fate. 19. The return of Hal J. Allison. When Japanese torpedoes struck the USS Oklahoma during the attack on Pearl Harbor, the massive battleship rolled over and sank in minutes. 429 men went down with her. Among them was a 21-year-old Navy fireman from Kentucky named Hal J. Allison. His body was recovered after the attack, but at the time, there was no way to identify him. The technology simply didn't exist. In 1949, he was buried as an unknown soldier in the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu. His name stayed on the list of the missing. His family never got answers. For more than 70 years, they waited. Then, in 2015, the Defense POW MIA accounting agency began exhuming unidentified remains from the Oklahoma. Using modern DNA and dental analysis, scientists worked through hundreds of cases. In October 2021, they finally identified Hal J. Allison. After 8 decades, his family could finally bring him home. A young man who died at 21 was no longer unknown. He had his name back. 18. The doppelganger of Spandau Prison. Rudolf Hess was Hitler's deputy. In 1941, he stunned the world by flying solo to Scotland in a bizarre attempt to negotiate peace with Britain. He was captured, sentenced at Nuremberg, and spent the rest of his life as the sole prisoner in Berlin's Spandau prison. But for decades, rumors swirled. Some believed the man behind those walls wasn't Hess at all. Even President Roosevelt had his doubts. Had the real Hess escaped while a body double took his place? The mystery seemed unsolvable, especially after Hess died in 1987 and his body was cremated. But fate had another twist. A tiny blood sample taken during a routine medical check in 1982 had been preserved on a microscope slide. Years later, scientists compared that blood to DNA from one of Hess's living relatives. The match was nearly perfect. The man who died in Spandau was Rudolf Hess. The conspiracy theory was finally put to rest. 17. The vanishing of Raoul Wallenberg. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a spy. He was a Swedish diplomat. But during the final months of World War II, Raoul Wallenberg became one of the greatest heroes of the Holocaust. Working in Nazi-occupied Hungary, he issued fake passports and set up safe houses marked with Swedish flags to protect Jewish families from deportation. He personally confronted Nazi officers. He pulled people off trains headed for death camps. By some estimates, he saved over 100,000 lives. But in January 1945, as Soviet forces arrived in Budapest, Wallenberg was arrested. He was taken away by Soviet soldiers who claimed they were keeping him safe. He was never seen again. The Soviets claimed he died of a heart attack in a Moscow prison in 1947. But there was no death certificate, no grave, no body returned to his family. Nothing but silence. For decades, reports surfaced of a Swedish prisoner being held deep inside Soviet facilities. Witnesses claimed to have seen him years after his supposed death. It wasn't until the early 2000s that the Russian government finally admitted the truth. Wallenberg had been wrongfully detained. Most historians now believe he was executed on Stalin's orders, his death hidden for political reasons. A man who saved so many couldn't save himself, and the world took half a century to learn the truth. 16. The truth about Hitler's death. Adolf Hitler reportedly took his own life in a bunker beneath Berlin on April 30, 1945, as Soviet forces closed in. His staff burned his body to prevent it from being captured. That's the official story. But without a public trial or confirmed remains, conspiracy theories exploded almost immediately. Some believed Hitler escaped through secret tunnels and fled to Argentina using Nazi rat lines. Others imagined him hiding in Antarctica. A few even suggested he made it to the dark side of the moon. For decades, these theories persisted. The Soviets didn't help. They kept what they found a secret, a jawbone, a fragment of skull, all locked away in a Moscow archive. Then, in 2009, scientists finally tested the skull fragment. The results were shocking. The bone belonged to a woman under 40, not Hitler. Conspiracy theorists rejoiced. Had he escaped after all? No. In 2017, French researchers were granted access to Hitler's preserved jawbone. The dental work matched his medical records exactly. Terrible gums, strange bridges, few real teeth. Traces of cyanide were found in the enamel. Hitler died in that bunker. The skull mystery was likely a Soviet mix-up or deliberate attempt to sow confusion. But his teeth told the final truth. Here's where things get interesting. Not all World War II mysteries were about people who vanished. Some were about things that may have never existed at all. 15. The Nazi Gold Train. For decades, whispers spread about a Nazi train loaded with stolen gold, priceless art, and possibly even secret weapons. As Soviet forces closed in during the final days of the war, the Third Reich allegedly hid the train deep beneath the Owl Mountains in Poland. In 2015, two amateur treasure hunters reignited that legend. Using ground-penetrating radar, they claimed to have found something massive buried beneath the earth near the town of Wałbrzych. Their radar showed an outline about 90 meters long. The story exploded. The Polish army stepped in to guard the site. Tourists flooded the area. Local shops started selling gold train souvenirs. The sleepy town became the center of global attention. Excavations began with cameras rolling, and they found nothing. No train, no tracks, no treasure, just dirt and rock. Most experts now believe the Nazi gold train never existed at all, a legend born from desperation and wishful thinking. 14. The myth of the Nazi bell. According to conspiracy theorists, the Nazis built a top-secret bell-shaped machine deep in occupied Poland. Some claimed it was an anti-gravity device. Others said it could manipulate time. A few believed it crashed in Pennsylvania in the 1960s. The story has captivated imaginations for decades. But the truth? Historians found no blueprints, no parts, no credible witnesses, no evidence whatsoever. The entire story was likely invented after the war, fueled by science fiction writers and Cold War paranoia. 13. The spy who vanished twice. Juan Pujol Garcia hated totalitarianism. When the Nazis rose to power, he wanted to fight them. He offered his services to British intelligence as a spy. They turned him down. So he made his own plan. He pretended to be a Nazi sympathizer and offered to spy for Germany instead. They accepted. He began feeding them completely fabricated intelligence from Lisbon and Madrid, inventing a network of fake informants across Britain. His reports contained just enough real-sounding details to be convincing. The Germans believed every word. When British intelligence finally realized what he was doing on his own, they recruited him immediately. Codenamed Agent Garbo, he became one of the most important double agents of the entire war. His greatest achievement came before D-Day. He convinced the Germans that Normandy was a distraction and that the real invasion would come elsewhere. German forces hesitated to reinforce Normandy, giving Allied troops a crucial advantage. After the war, fearing revenge from surviving Nazis who might learn of his deception, Garcia faked his own death in 1948. He let his family believe he had died of malaria. For nearly 40 years, the world thought he was gone. Then in the 1980s, a British journalist tracked him down, living quietly in Venezuela, still alive, the spy who fooled the Nazis and then fooled everyone else. 12. Japan's floating bombs. Between 1944 and 1945, mysterious explosions began appearing across the western United States. Strange debris washed ashore on beaches. Farmers found unusual wreckage in their fields. No one knew where any of it was coming from. The truth was astonishing. Japan had launched over 9,000 hydrogen-filled balloons from the mainland. Each one carried incendiary bombs. Using jet stream winds, they drifted all the way across the Pacific Ocean, a journey of over 5,000 miles. About 300 made it to North America, landing in states from Washington to Texas. The US government immediately censored all news coverage. They didn't want Japan to know the attacks were working. They didn't want panic spreading. Then tragedy struck. On May 5, 1945, a pastor's wife and 5 children on a church picnic near Bly, Oregon, found a downed balloon in the woods. When they touched it, the bomb exploded. All 6 were killed instantly. Only then did the government reveal the truth. They remain the only people killed by enemy action on the US mainland during World War II. 11. The Ghost Blimp. In August 1942, a Navy blimp called L-8 lifted off from San Francisco Bay on a routine patrol. 2 experienced officers were aboard. 5 hours later, the blimp crashed into a residential neighborhood. The door was hanging open. The parachutes were untouched. The radio was working, but the crew was gone. No signs of struggle, no damage, just two men who vanished without explanation. Their last transmission reported spotting an oil slick, possibly from a submarine. After that, silence. Most experts believe both men fell overboard while investigating something outside the gondola. The ocean never gave them back. Some World War II mysteries stayed hidden, not in documents, but at the bottom of the sea. 10. How the swastika became a Nazi symbol. For thousands of years, the swastika appeared across cultures around the world. In ancient India, it symbolized good fortune. In Buddhism, it represented eternity. Native American tribes used it in sacred art. It was a symbol of peace, harmony, and prosperity. Then Adolf Hitler took it and twisted it into something horrifying. He personally designed the Nazi flag. The red background represented what he called the social mission of his movement. The white circle stood for nationalism, and the black swastika, he claimed it represented Aryan racial superiority. The mystery was never about what the symbol meant before. It was about how one man could transform a sacred image, used for millennia across civilizations, into an emblem of genocide and hatred. 9. The Vanishing of Glenn Miller. Glenn Miller was the biggest bandleader in America. His music defined a generation. When he joined the military to boost morale during the war, it was national news. In December 1944, he boarded a small military plane in England, heading to Paris to perform for troops. The plane took off over the English Channel. It never arrived. There was no distress call, no wreckage found, no survivors recovered. Glenn Miller simply vanished. For decades, the disappearance remained one of the war's most haunting mysteries. Then researchers uncovered a chilling possibility. A squadron of Allied bombers returning from a cancelled mission had orders to drop their unused bombs into the English Channel before landing. They did exactly that. The timing and location matched Miller's flight path almost exactly. His plane may have flown directly beneath them at exactly the wrong moment, destroyed by friendly fire without anyone realizing it. He was 40 years old, gone in an instant. 8. The Nazi uranium cubes. For years, people believed the Nazis were dangerously close to building an atomic bomb during World War II. The fear was real. Allied forces launched missions specifically to stop their nuclear program. But how close were they really? Researchers studying one of the last remaining Nazi uranium cubes used advanced dating techniques to trace its origins. The cube was real, created in the early 1940s as part of Nazi nuclear experiments. But the science behind their program was deeply flawed. The Nazis lacked the right materials. They didn't have enough heavy water. They didn't have the industrial capacity or secure facilities. Internal politics slowed everything down. And then there was Allied sabotage. The destruction of a heavy water plant in Norway crippled whatever progress they had made. The truth? Nazi Germany was never close to building a nuclear weapon. Not even close. 7. The sinking of the Lancastria. In June 1940, German bombers attacked the British troop ship HMT Lancastria off the coast of France. The vessel was packed with soldiers and civilians being evacuated as France fell to the Nazis. Within 20 minutes, the massive ship rolled over and sank, and almost no one heard about it. Winston Churchill ordered a complete press blackout. The reason? No one knew exactly how many people were on board. Estimates run as high as 9,000 souls. Only about 2,400 survived. For decades, families were left in the dark. Their loved ones were simply listed as missing. The government refused to discuss it. Survivors were told not to speak. It's believed more people died on the Lancastria than on the Titanic and Lusitania combined. One of the worst maritime disasters in history, deliberately buried to protect wartime morale. 6. Norwegian heavy water sabotage. The Nazis needed a rare substance called heavy water to pursue their nuclear experiments. A remote power plant in Norway was producing it. The Allies couldn't allow that to continue. The mission was called Operation Gunnicide. Norwegian commandos trained in Scotland parachuted into their homeland. They skied for days across frozen wilderness, evading German patrols. They snuck into the heavily guarded facility at night, planted explosives, and escaped without firing a shot. The sabotage worked. Key parts of the facility were destroyed. When Germany tried to ship what remained of their heavy water supply, Norwegian resistance fighters struck again. This time, they sank the ferry carrying the barrels. After the war, Allied records confirmed it. The sabotage had crippled the Nazi nuclear program. A handful of brave men may have changed the course of history. 5. The discovery of the Bismarck. The German battleship Bismarck was one of the most feared warships of World War II. Armed with massive guns and protected by thick armor, it terrorized Allied shipping lanes. In May 1941, it sank the British battlecruiser HMS Hood, killing all but 3 of her 1,400 crew. The Royal Navy hunted Bismarck relentlessly. On May 27, 1941, she sank beneath the waves. Only 114 of her 2,200 crew survived. For nearly 50 years, no one knew exactly where she rested. Then in 1989, oceanographer Robert Ballard, the man who discovered the Titanic, found her. 15,000 feet deep, resting upright, her hull largely intact. What he found was surprising. Only 8 holes in her armored hull, most above the waterline. The damage didn't match what would be expected from a ship sunk by torpedoes alone. Many historians now believe the Germans scuttled their own ship to prevent capture. 4. Hitler's bunker. For decades after the war, the exact location of Hitler's final hiding place was a mystery. The Führer bunker had been deliberately hidden by East German authorities. It was removed from maps. No markers indicated its location. Some believed it was completely destroyed. Others thought it was still buried somewhere under modern Berlin. The truth? It was right where it always had been, beneath what is now a quiet apartment complex and parking lot in central Berlin. The bunker remained almost untouched. Soviet troops who captured the city documented everything, but kept it all secret. It wasn't until the 1990s that historians gained access to those files. Combined with investigations, they confirmed the exact location, just a short walk from the Brandenburg Gate. Today, nothing remains above ground except a small informational sign. 3. Who betrayed Anne Frank? Anne Frank's diary is one of the most powerful accounts of the Holocaust ever written. Her family hid in a secret annex behind an Amsterdam office building for over 2 years. Then, in August 1944, Nazi police arrived at the exact address. They knew exactly where to look. The Frank family was arrested and deported. Anne died in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp just weeks before liberation. For nearly 80 years, one question haunted historians: who betrayed them? In 2022, a team led by a retired FBI agent announced their findings after a 6-year investigation. Their prime suspect, Arnold van den Berg, a Jewish notary who may have given addresses of Jews in hiding to protect his own family. Not everyone agrees. The Anne Frank house says the evidence isn't conclusive. The truth may never be fully confirmed, but after 8 decades, we're closer to an answer than ever before. 2. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. For decades, many believed Hiroshima and Nagasaki were chosen purely for psychological impact, that they were civilian cities with no military value. That's not entirely true. Declassified documents reveal a more complex picture. Hiroshima housed Japan's Second Army headquarters, weapons factories, and large troop concentrations. Nagasaki had shipyards and munitions plants vital to the war effort. Both cities had genuine military targets, but that doesn't diminish what happened. Tens of thousands of civilians died instantly. Many more suffered agonizing deaths from radiation in the weeks and years that followed. The bombings ended the war. They also changed warfare forever, and the debate over whether they were justified continues to this day. 1. The Soviet liberation myth. For decades, the Soviet Union was celebrated for liberating Eastern Europe from Nazi occupation. School children across the communist bloc learned that the Red Army swept in and freed oppressed nations. But when the USSR collapsed in 1991 and secret archives finally opened, a much darker reality emerged. Soviet forces didn't liberate Eastern Europe. They occupied it. In Poland, Hungary, Romania, and the Baltic states, the Soviets replaced one brutal regime with another. Communist governments, loyal only to Moscow, were installed. Elections were rigged. Opposition parties were crushed. Political opponents were arrested, tortured, or deported. In Hungary, Soviet tanks crushed a popular uprising in 1956. Thousands were killed. Hundreds of thousands fled the country. In the Baltic states, mass deportations tore families apart for years. Resistance fighters who survived the Nazi occupation were hunted down. In Poland, the nation where World War II began, independence was replaced by a puppet government backed by Soviet guns. People who had just survived Nazi brutality were forced to endure Soviet repression. Many waited decades for freedom that wouldn't come until the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. The world called it liberation. It was conquest by another name. These 20 mysteries stayed buried for decades, some because the technology didn't exist to solve them, some because governments wanted them hidden, and some because the truth was simply too painful to face. But now we know. DNA testing brought sailors home 80 years after Pearl Harbor. Declassified files exposed cover-ups and uncomfortable truths. Underwater expeditions found ships lost for half a century. Cold case investigations pointed fingers at suspects long thought beyond reach. Some answers bring closure to families who waited generations. Others force us to rethink everything we thought we knew about who the heroes were, who the villains were, and what really happened during the darkest years of the 20th century. History isn't just about what happened. It's about what we were told and what we weren't. Which of these 20 mysteries shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.